You a little bit about what we do and tell you a little bit about some of the trends that we think are really important and interesting, shaping the future of financial services as it is today. After that, Alec has the opportunity really to interview Sohail, and I will let all of them kind of take it from here. Alec, are you? I'm so sorry. Here you go.
No, definitely. Thank you, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to have you all here tonight, to discuss the future of financial services as we conceive it, but I think much more the trends and fundamental disruptions and transformations that are happening across society and culture that are impacting financial services. And so, as Keisha mentioned, we have an amazing group of panelists and speakers here tonight. I am by far the least interesting person that you're going to hear from, but I'm going to set a little bit of context as to why we're all here, what it is that we do, and then we're going to dive into our first interview. First and foremost, what is this place and who is GSVlabs? We're an innovation platform based here in Silicon Valley in Boston. We work with all of the stakeholders of the innovation economy, startups, corporations, governments, nonprofits, investors, everything in between, because we think magical things happen when you bring all of those stakeholders inside one physical community, but increasingly inside one virtual community, and network effects really take off there. We have about 200 physical startups in our innovation centers between here and in Boston. We have 8,000 startups on our online platform, about 50 join every day. So increasingly, all of the resources and value that we provide is available online, on demand, from any device. And that's what gets us really excited about the future. And our goal is to bring together all the resources that an early stage company needs to really do amazing things. As I mentioned, you don't have to be in one of our innovation centers to get value out of this. We have GSV Passport, which puts our community, our mentor network, our investors, $1 million in technology services and technology platforms, all of our learning content and best practices content, all online. And it's not just for startups. Universities, nonprofits, governments are private labeling the platform to manage their own startup ecosystem. And super excited to announce that we're now in early release of both the B2B platform for universities like University of Pennsylvania, Tech Day Monterey, University College London as of yesterday, and we're powering their ecosystems. And then as of now, we're also developing a new version of the platform for large global enterprises that want to stand up, manage, and grow their internal innovation ecosystem. So in the end of the day, what we're really moving towards is powering the innovation communities of universities, corporations, startups, and everything in between. So that's GSVlabs. You've heard more than enough about that. What we're really excited today is to talk about is kind of the dynamic and landscape of financial services and what's so different and magical about today when it comes to this future of financial services. And so when we say financial services, we basically mean everything. Financial services are wrapped into almost every element of commerce, the economy, every good and service. And we're talking about things like banking and lending, investments and wealth management, insurance, payments. And when you put all of these things together, it's expected to be a $26.5 trillion industry by 2022. But it's an industry that's going through massive transformations and kind of shifts in value. And so we'll take 2 or 3 minutes and talk through some of those gravitational shifts that we think are redefining the future of financial services. The first of those gravitational shifts is what we call the experience economy. And so if you look at how value has been delivered historically over time, it started with commodities, it evolved into manufactured and made goods, then we had what we called the service economy, and then now we're in this new kind of landscape where it's actually experiences and the ability to deliver delightful customer experiences that generate the most value for companies. And so when we say an experience, what we mean is this memorable event around, a consumer service or consumer experience that's actually developed into a distinct economic offering. And this isn't a new concept. There are brands that we love and we trust that have, built amazing experiences around them, like Apple and Disney and Starbucks and Nike, that were more than just the service or the good they provided, but this ethos which consumers interacted with. And what we're seeing now is that dynamic is coming to financial services, and it's coming to a bank near you, where, more than a transaction or more than a payment, it's actually how do you take this burdensome, process of financial services and actually make it delightful. The second major shift, and this is one that's driving that first shift towards experience, is what we call digital natives rule. We are obsessed with the class of 2020. These are people who are graduating university next year. I know we've got a great group from the University of Toronto here tonight. Woot woot, shout out. And the class of 2020 is, so interesting. I know every generation says that the generation after them is so fundamentally different and, unlike them. But when it comes to the class of 2020, there's actually some real truth to it. Because 21 years ago, a couple magical things happened. First and foremost, Google was born. And so most of the class of 2020 grew up with information being ubiquitous, free, on demand. Today we have 4 trillion Google searches a day. And so the class of 2020 expects, seamless information on demand the way they want it. 21 years ago, Steve Jobs went back to Apple, and the personal computer became a reality. So most of the class of 2020 grew up with a computer in their home, in their library, in their school, and there's an expectation that technology is intuitive, ubiquitous, and valuable to people. The smartphone is a phone. Most of the class of 2020 cannot imagine not having endless computing power sitting in their pocket. And as a result of that, expectations around every mode of commerce have changed. Everything's on demand and personalized, from transportation to commerce, to delivery of food. Even media is now being delivered in completely different models based upon these changing consumer demands. And the reality is it's coming to financial services. As this new group of consumers comes in, becomes the workforce and the main earners in the economy, there are major new expectations they have around what financial services mean to them. There's a huge trust and confidence in technology. On the flip side, there's a massive lack of trust in traditional financial institutions because most of the class of 2020 grew up during the foreclosure and financial crisis of the 2000s, and they grew up with their friends, their families, losing their homes, losing pensions. So it's no surprise that millennial home ownership is down about 10% just from 2007. Millennials, they don't only want to not own cars, homes, they don't even want to own cars. Last year was the first year that more cars were sold to people over 75 than between 18 and 24. And what this is really reflecting is a shift in how this class of 2020, this digital native group, values assets. And as a result of that, financial services firms are having to change how they interact, developing things like on-demand insurance, flexible wealth management that really fit the needs and expectations of this emerging, digital native group. The third shift is what we call banking unbundled. And if you spend time in financial services, this won't be a particularly new concept to you. If you look at the 15 largest banks in the US, they have about $13 trillion in assets. And all you have to do is go to any one of their home pages to see that they basically do everything. Lending, insurance, business banking, all of the financial institutions of today have become these massive kind of cross-functional platforms. And every single one of those functions is being attacked at the margins by hundreds or thousands of emerging startups. So we see every single thing that Wells Fargo used to do is now being done by this massive portfolio of emerging fintech companies. And that's being fueled by an incredible amount of capital that's going into the space. So if you look from 2011 to 2018, a huge growth in venture capital going into the fintech space, about 40 billion last year, which actually represents 20x growth from just 2011. So we're living in this phenomena of more and more capital going towards unbundling these kind of legacy banking systems. But it's not just startups. The biggest tech companies in the world are diving into financial services with things like the Apple Card, which gave out $10 billion in credit in less than 30 days. Things like Amazon Pay that now have over 300 million users. And so Amazon is going and trying to disrupt every business payment structure that exists out there today. And it's not just in the US. If you go to Alibaba and Tencent in China, they actually have about 90% market share when it comes to mobile payments. And they're actually starting to look like financial services firms. The average Ant Financial user has over 3 financial services that they're doing with the firm, which is starting to look more like a legacy bank rather than a technology company. But again, it's not even just the technology companies. Those experience economy trusted brands that we love so much are moving into financial services. You may blow your mind, but the Starbucks payment app has 25.2 million users. Until 2 weeks ago, it was the single most used payment application in the United States, ahead of Apple Pay. It was literally 2 weeks ago that Apple Pay actually surpassed Starbucks as having more payment use than a single retailer. And Starbucks still has more than twice as many users as Google Pay or Samsung Pay. So all of these brands that we love and trust are starting to move down into financial services. The fourth gravitational shift is what we call automation and democratization. And this likely won't come as a surprise to anyone. We are now, the 50th anniversary of Moore's Law, and this was the presupposition that computing power would increase exponentially. And 50 years later, what we've seen is that it's largely been true, and that's had some pretty dramatic impacts across just about every industry and every culture. The cost of computing has declined about 99% since 2000. Cost of storage has taken a very similar route. So compute storage today are basically free, ubiquitous, endless. We like to kind of tell a joke that if hard assets and hard goods decreased in the same rate, a car that cost $20,000 in 1990 would cost $1 today, and we'd probably throw it away after every single use. And that's the real power of digital infrastructure and digital economics. So today we have 3.7 billion people with internet access, 2.6 billion smartphones, hundreds of billions of app downloads, and these are digital infrastructure that's allowing new ideas, new applications to go from the back of a napkin to millions of users almost overnight. And it's what's allowing things like $7 trillion to be managed by robo-financial advisors by 2025. And so this automation is kind of affecting every layer of both financial services, but even beyond financial services. And what we're seeing is a fundamental change in how financial services are delivered as a result of automation. Historically, it was kind of a great pyramid. The best financial services were reserved for the people at the very top. And you had to have a certain net worth or income to really access high quality financial services. What we're now living in as a result of automation and digital disruption is a world of financial services for all, where you get financial services and you get financial services and you get financial services because we're able to deliver them at a cost and with an infrastructure value that we just couldn't do historically. But so all that, I just talked for 10 minutes very quickly about all of the interesting innovation and kind of disruption that's happening, but we need a little bit of a reality check. And there are some folks in the audience here who come from large financial institutions, and as I've been saying all of this, the reality check's probably been going off in the back of their head, which is despite all of this innovation and change, the world is actually moving very slowly. And financial services is actually changing relatively slowly. So we love talking about how disruptive startups are, but in the end of the day, advantage goes to the incumbents. So just for a little bit of context, go to the largest robo-advisor in the world, Wealthfront. They're managing about $21 billion in assets. Compare that to the largest traditional wealth manager at $1.7 trillion, right? So just the smallest fraction of a fraction of market share in this space. Go to the largest online bank, Ally, about $106 billion. Then go to JP Morgan Chase. So these emerging technology companies are doing amazing things, but they're doing it in an environment that's incredibly biased against them because of the power that these incumbent financial institutions have. And so, you're seeing financial institutions take advantage of these new technologies and methodologies. People like Goldman Sachs launching Marcus, their new robo-advisory and, bottom of the pyramid solution. So these are opportunities both for the new emerging companies as well as for the incumbents. So it leads to a very reasonable question of what's next. We have breakthrough disruption happening on the ground. We have trillion-dollar financial institutions on the other side. And the first wave was these disruptive companies coming and trying to disrupt or break the legacy financial institutions. I personally think that wave is slowing down, and we're seeing a new wave, which is, did we just become best friends? And an opportunity to take the talent, the speed, and the agility of early stage emerging technology companies, combine them with the distribution, the assets, the brand of these legacy institutions to really create an environment of partnership and experimentation. So what we're particularly excited about is not the disruptive technology companies. It's not the legacy financial institutions that are driving innovation. It's the folks that are creating that ecosystem and bringing those together, because that's where we really think breakthrough innovation will happen, and we'll see all these institutions start to form new habits for a new way of working. So what's the future? The future is rapidly expanding technology across various horizontals: AI, IoT, blockchain, the list of technology buzzwords goes on and on and on. On the other side of the equation, you have rapidly changing consumer demands, new digital natives that have completely different expectations of what financial services are going to be. And what's going to bring those two together is breakthrough innovation in financial services and fintech. And that's what we're hoping to discuss today. You don't have to listen to me anymore. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and we'll dive right into the content in one moment. Thank you so much. So with that, I will speak far less, and it's my pleasure to welcome Sohail Aslam from PayActiv to the stage. Hold it down. Wouldn't be the Valley without some technical difficulties. Well, perfect. And I will save you having to listen through an introduction of yourself from me. I'd love you to just tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and about PayActiv and how you got here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Yeah, my name is Sohail. I'm one of the co-founders and chief technology officer at PayActiv. We are based in San Jose, California. I think it was 2011, 2012 when we thought about this idea. I mean, we are living in Silicon Valley, and there are so many solution-chasing problems. We were fortunate enough that we detected a problem that was a genuine problem. And the problem was nothing but people living paycheck to paycheck. So we realized more than 90 million people, they were living paycheck to paycheck. They didn't even have $400 in savings. And they were becoming victim to these services such as payday loan shops, pawn shops. So we thought this was a problem we detected, and this was not a good problem, but a bad problem. So it really needed a solution. We had backgrounds, myself and the team, we had background in payments and in financial services. So we thought about digging further into the problem. It turned out that people who were going to the payday loan shops and pawn shops, or they were becoming victim of overdraft fees, they were basically able to get this money because of their payroll that was locked. So when somebody was going to the payday loan shops, basically they were asking a loan, and the lender was giving them money with the hope that this person was working and was going to get money on a certain date. So they were giving them, let's say, $200, and they were charging them about $30, $40, $50, whatever was possible at that time. So we thought this is bad for the people, and there is a disruption that was waiting for us. And that's how we came up with the solution of PayActiv, where we enable people to access their own income whenever they want. So in reality, we made payroll real time. So in general, payroll is like a batch process, right? You work for a pay period, 2 weeks, 1 week, or a month, and your employer pushes money to you. We try to enable people so that they could pull their money. So it was a push versus pull. It was a technical thing, right? Push versus pull. So we enable people to be able to pull their money, and that was the solution.
Super helpful. And talk to me a little bit about the business model and how you get into the payroll cycle through the employer. What does a deployment of PayActiv look like?
Sure. So we were trying to, go after payday loan shops. So we didn't want to become a payday loan, right? So what could we do was that we thought, what could we do to eliminate all those hurdles which were there so that our cost was minimum? So when we found that there were ways that we could access the income data, like the earned hours, the hourly rate, and so on, those data elements we were looking for, we were able to find those ways to get the data. So we realized we needed to have census data and employees' basic information, like employee ID, first name, last name, and so on. And we also were looking for hourly data. Most of the hourly employees were victim of this payday loan business. So we realized that there was a way that time and attendance systems could spit out information, and we could capture that information through secured methods such as SFTP or back then, like 7 years ago, we even leveraged on SharePoint and even email. So we were able to access the data. We did basic maths, and we concluded the gross income. And then we found that we could afford to give 50% of the income. First, we thought maybe employers would let us take their money and give it to the employees. It turned out that employers were not interested. So
They like the float.
there you go. Exactly. Exactly. So then we thought, okay, we'll make sure that we arrange the money, and we did arrange the money. So we started giving money to people. So today, the way it works is we get those two data feeds, census data and time and attendance data, and then when the pay period ends, all the money that people have accessed, we submit a deduction. It could be leveraging on those channels or APIs which payroll companies have, or we can just send the old-fashioned files that banking system is based on. So we send the deduction file, employer processes the deduction, and as a result, they return our money back to us. So this whole cycle completes as the payday comes.
No, and it sounds like an immense amount of technical infrastructure and complexity that kind of gets you there. I think most of us have seen a lot of different platforms that are going after this space of, delay in payments and how do we smooth out, for the workforce. How do you think about differentiating PayActiv kind of from the rest of that ecosystem?
Sure. So it's maybe a bit funny that our technology, PayActiv technology, is egoless technology. There's no ego in the technology. I mean, when we started, we thought that we should have this solution for people that they could access their own income. How could they access? Well, the classic method was that have a mobile app or a desktop version that we could have for people. But then we also realized that there were some people, they wanted to have their own flavor around that. So we crafted our architecture in such a way that people could embrace us, people could encapsulate PayActiv technology. So today what you see in the mobile app, we have partners who have taken our app and have embedded inside their own app. So that is something we call as embedded mode. So people can embed inside it. Few of our partners that we have, one of the scheduling company, so they have embedded us inside their app. So people basically log in their mobile app just because they want to see that how much is accessible I have. Keep in mind, maybe it's a separate thing from the core topic or core question, but keep in mind that people, when they see that number, how much money is accessible to them, that gives them peace of mind. In the beginning, when we rolled it out, people were logging into our mobile app and they were not doing anything. So we were questioning that, is there any problem in our app or in our system? There was no problem. So we called few people, then we tried to detect the behavior, and we realized that people, just like many other people who log into their bank accounts, maybe at least once a week or multiple times in a week, just to see, oh, my money is available? Okay, fine, just log out and come out. Same behavior we could detect. So in our technology, we not only enable our partners to embed our solution inside their technology, but also we unleashed our API. It's a RESTful API, so people can embed us, people can integrate with us. And that's how in different flavors, so there's no branding consciousness that we have. You can interact, you can deploy our technology by having inside your own technology, or just take this technology as is.
And just to provide some context to everyone, how many employees can currently access PayActiv? What's the scale of the company and the technology right now?
So we have thousands of employers right now who have embraced. I would like to tell you that the largest employer in the world is private employer is Walmart, and Walmart utilizes PayActiv. We have several others who are basically using, and then as we are growing, many larger employers, they are embracing PayActiv.
And so you've gotten a really interesting spot in the market right now, which is this, employee-centric, wellness and payment opportunity. Where do you want PayActiv to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now? And what's the big picture vision for the company beyond, that element?
Sure. For PayActiv, when we started in 2012 and 2013, when we went live with first customer, we enabled people to access their own income. But we didn't stop there. We didn't stop there because we thought there was a huge room to have a greater impact. So as a result, we started adding more services. The initial solution was that you could take the money, you could take money by utilizing an ATM or by using your bank account. But we also added more services, such as you could load funds on PayPal, you could load funds on Amazon. Why Amazon? Because today, if you don't have a credit card or an instrument, you cannot make any purchases. We did partnership with Amazon. You could load funds on Amazon and you can make the purchases. The best of all, one of the best integrations that we have, or the partnership that we have, is with Uber. So today, you use your income, earn income. You don't have a credit card, no problem. You just have PayActiv app. You can buy rides. 3 weeks ago, I was looking at our data and I realized there is somebody in North Carolina. She utilized PayActiv Uber integration 23 times. We maximum allow $500, 50% of income that people can access up to $500. She utilized $483 and got 23 rides. You know why? Car was not there, broke down. So living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have money, your car is not functional, you cannot go to your workplace. You are in a hole that you cannot come out. However, with PayActiv, the money that she had already earned, she could leverage on that money and she could buy all those rides. So all these services that we have been adding, that's where we see that we are different. And we recently got our first patent, and the patent is about we have elevated earned wage access at a level where you see it competing with different instruments. So today, if you have to pay a bill or you have to make a purchase, you would use your credit card or a bank account or maybe cash. Well, today, if you have PayActiv app and you have earned income, you directly use that. So in other words, we have removed all those instruments in between your payment or your usage. You just directly pull your funds right from your earned wage access pool and utilize it. And that's the innovation, and that's where we are today, and we will keep adding more and more services which are applicable to millions of people.
And as you look at the move that PayActiv's making inside of payments, it mirrors a much broader transition that's happening with kind of redefined work roles. And that's something that we discussed when we talked a couple days ago, which is with the rise of the gig economy and the freelancer economy, you're seeing these expectations start to get kind of baked into some of these businesses. How do you see those new business models affecting both maybe the opportunity and future of PayActiv?
Yeah, so I think gig economy is validating what we had envisioned 7-8 years ago. Today, one of the fear traditional employers have is that they are losing their employees because of gig economy. And the use case is as follows. If I'm living paycheck to paycheck and life happens, I don't have money, my employer would be paying me when the payday comes. Well, guess what? That morning, I would prefer to work for Uber or Lyft. Why? Because at the end of the day, I'll be able to access my income. So gig economy is really helping us because we are enabling traditional employers to offer the same service. Why lose employees to Uber and Lyft or other gig economy players? You can keep your employees. You can beef up your retention. And as a result, employees would stay there. Why? Because they will be able to access their own income. It's all about empowerment. It's all about, I would say, control. If I feel that I have control of my own income, it's not a loan or advance, I would settle there. I would be more engaged. I'll be focusing more. So we thank gig economy that they have highlighted it.
No, that's fair. I don't know a lot of people thanking the gig economy right now, but it's always great to find one. You made a kind of interesting point there, which is PayActiv has been around for a little while. I think it was founded back in 2012. Yep. What are some of the I was talking about kind of magic of technology and infrastructure. What are some of the things that you can do today that 10 or 15 years ago were impossible that now make PayActiv real?
Sure. I think this concept of app store or marketplace, probably it's a better word, this concept that everybody's coming up with the marketplace is unique. Ever since it emerged, people thought that there should be a way to share the data. So the emergence of APIs, today you see from SOAP to RESTful APIs that we have. Why? Because we want to make sure that that data is shared easily. So maybe 10, 15 years ago, the ecosystems of API was not that stronger. Today we have partnership with many different payroll companies, time and attendance companies, like the larger ones, ADP, Kronos, Paychecks, other service providers that we have, the Amazons of the world and Ubers of the world. They have APIs. These APIs were not existing before, like 15 years ago or so. So now because we have that, we can integrate with them. Not only that, but we have also exposed our API by understanding the importance of that. As a result, we have partners who have integrated with us. So this interaction, this focus on sharing data is helping us a lot.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's a beautiful segue into the negative or the dark side of sharing data, which is I don't think we can have a conversation around financial services innovation without discussing data and cybersecurity and privacy. With you having millions of employees whose financial information is flowing through your system, how do you convince the Walmarts of the world that this is the right place for financial data to be flowing?
Absolutely. So, security, as we know, security is not a linear thing. It's a layered thing. So we at PayActiv, we have made sure that we have multiple layers, so that even if somebody crosses one layer, the second layer is there as a hindrance. That is one thing. So all the bells and whistles that are needed, we have put in place. We have acquired those certifications just to validate, not to have certifications for the sake of certifications, such as ISO 27001 or these casual, usual SOC 1, SOC 2 reports, to validate that. We have done partnerships with different other companies, like for example, Qualys and Palladium, these different companies that we utilize. So they scan us. They validate that it's not possible to get into our network or into our solution. But one thing we know that it's not easy anymore to penetrate into anybody's network. Most of the time when the problem happens from inside. Some insider takes the data and just puts somewhere, maybe on the dark web or anywhere. So that's where the control comes. In our product, in our solution, because what you see is a mobile app, but then there is a huge backend. So we have defined those tiers, we have defined those roles, and then the privileges. As a result, what you need, only you have access to that. So that is about the access side. But when it comes to storing the data, there is a fundamental thing. When you get the data, if you're really a data geek, you would love to have anything that is coming your way. However, there is a cost to that. So at PayActiv, when we store any information in our data repositories, we are very careful. We do debate that should we store this data or should we not store this data? Is it possible that we could have partners where we store the data and have a reference to that data? Card is one example. We wouldn't store full card number, but we could store a reference. I mean, if that is the nature of business, if I'm like a merchant, why should I store the card information? I should just store a reference, and the card should be with the processor. Card should be with the institute who is issuing. So with the reference, I could execute the complete transaction. So it's multiple things that you have to do, and that's what we do to make sure that our data is secured.
So it's a big, scary world out there. I'm glad I'm not having to run security for you all. My favorite question to ask, and this will be the last question, then we'll throw it over to the audience. If folks have any questions, want to make sure you have a chance to get the voice on the stage. But what's one topic or trend or opportunity inside this landscape of financial wellness that you're really excited about, but no one's really talking about today, or there's not a huge focus on, but you think a year from now or 2 years from now we'll be up on stage, diving into that topic? What's out there for you?
Sure. I think it was a similar topic that I was covering a few weeks ago at HR Tech Conference, and the topic was people-centric HR. So what is people-centric HR? People-centric HR is where you think by putting your feet in their shoes. Gone are the days that I could judge my employees that, if they are broken or they don't have enough funds or they are living paycheck to paycheck, that's their problem. That's not the state we are living in today. We have to beef up our offerings when it comes to benefits. We have to think in terms of their problems. We have to see how we can solve the problems. And that's what PayActiv has done. PayActiv today, the flagship service certainly is access to earned wages. However, today you can make purchases by these partnerships that we have We have provided financial counseling. We have provided financial literacy. Saving and budgeting tools are there as well. So there is an assortment of services that we have provided. Go back to the question, employers have to pay more. They have to play a bigger role here. You have to participate in all those initiatives, because the thing is, if your employee is financially stressed, can you imagine that the person, give 100% of her work or her time or her mind? Impossible. So if we want to get 100% of our employees, we have to make sure that we help them to reduce the financial stress. And with all these different services, we can help them. There's no guarantee that we can reduce all the financial stress, but at least we can make an attempt. And these are proven attempts that we have made, and we believe this in next 1, 2, 3 years, employers are going to embrace this program. Employers are going to have those services which remove or reduce financial stress.
Well, at least the employers that want to retain their workforce will. And I look forward to next November having you back here to talk about financial wellness as a benefit and the emergence of that trend. With that, I want to thank Sohail for dealing with my questions, and would love to turn it over to the audience. I think we have a couple folks probably that have microphones in the back. Kate there. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and she will bring you a mic, and we'd love you to ask it into that mic. So I think we'll go with this gentleman over here. Hold down power.
So can you hear? Okay.
Yes.
So it sounded like your what you're providing is kind of cross between a credit card and a debit card, because somehow you have to finance the purchase, right? Somebody's using the money, so you have to somehow put up that upfront.
So I would say we have nothing to do with credit card or debit card.
No, I mean in terms of the functionality,
Yeah.
in the sense that because they're taking an advance.
Yeah.
But to a limit, which is what debit card kind of provides.
No, it's a great question. Honestly, it's a great question. But because it's a new idea, so let me explain that. First thing, when we explain this solution, it's not a loan, not even an advance. Because if I'm earning, let's say I'm earning $100 every day, right? And I work at a place where after 2 weeks I get my salary. Well, if I'm in the middle of pay period, I can't access the income that I have already earned. What we have done is we have enabled employees to access their own income. So it's earned income.
Yeah, I understand that. My question is to you, because you somehow have to advance the money, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, so we have interaction, we have integrations with different rails. We have integration with ACH. We have integration with Visa. So as a result, you can bring any bank account, you can bring any card. We are able to put money on those instruments.
And I think a sorted question there is, how do you finance that?
So we have partners. We have money in our bank that we utilize, and money in our partner's bank that we utilize, and that's how we front the cash. But eventually, this money comes back after the pay period ends.
The more you get business, the more you have to finance it.
That is true. Yeah, but keep in mind, the time period is small. It's just the pay period. You are accessing in the middle of pay period ends, pay day comes, we get our money back.
Any other questions? Kate, pick someone.
Hi. Oh, wow, that's loud. Can you lay out where you are in terms of technology and just where you are in the market versus an Earn and Dave even kind of a situation, and maybe even in philosophy, how you approach it, the financial wellness as a benefit versus just straight to consumer, that type of thing?
Yeah, so Earnin and Dave, they are direct-to-consumer solutions. So their idea is that, they have nothing to do with the employer. They are just trying to make sure that if somebody is working, they can give money, and then after that, they debit the bank account of those employees. That's how they do that. If it's just the money, then certainly you can accomplish that. But we, philosophically and also for genuine reasons, we wanted to have a model where we could engage employers. Because when employer is involved, we get much more data, much more information that not only we can serve them by letting them access their own income, but we can also offer them other services. So in our case, let's say in their case, for example, having a bank account is mandatory. Why? Because they have to debit the money, on the pay date. In our case, if employer is doing the deduction processing, we don't need to have a bank account. If somebody just opens the account and only utilizing Uber service or Amazon service, fine. You don't have a bank account, that's fine. There's so many people who are underbanked, who are unbanked, so they cannot use those services, but they could use PayActiv service.
Time for one final question.
So my question is, how are you actually making revenue? Are you charging the employer, or are you just charging less than a typical loan shark would for the same money?
I love that question. Yeah, so when we started, so one option could have been that become a better payday lender, right? So no, we didn't want to do that. So today, if you, I'll just put an example here. If you use your debit card at a different bank than your own bank, what happens? You pay $3 to that ATM. Like if I have a Bank of America bank account and I go to Wells Fargo would charge me $3. And Bank of America would be mad, why did I go to that bank? And they would be charging me $2.95 or $2.50. So I'm being charged $5.50 at least, much more different other banks or ATMs. What we charge is $5 for the whole pay period. You access 50% of your income, up to $500. If your pay period is weekly, you give us $3. It's a club membership, you can say, lack of a better word. You pay $3 or $5 based on the pay period type, and you have access to those services, like an assortment of services. You can have unlimited number of rides. As I was giving this example, this lady in North Carolina utilized 23 times, so 23 transactions. We were not charging her 23 times. The moment she did her first transaction, first ride, she got the membership. She paid $5. After that, everything was free. It was like a buffet.
And that is a beautiful place to end this, the buffet of financial services. Thank you so much for your time
Thanks
here
so
today.
much.
It was an absolute pleasure hearing from you. And you'll hear from a bunch of other really interesting folks as we leave. Me again. It is an absolute pleasure to introduce our next interview. We have Tara Lookabout from our corporate innovation team and Ale Vigilante from Fidelity to dive deeper into this question of financial institutions driving innovation. Thank you.
Thanks, Alec, and thank you guys for coming. As Alec mentioned, my name's Tara. I am our Enterprise Innovation Director at GSVlabs, which means I get to spend all of my time with Ale and the folks at Fidelity and all of our other corporate partners. So Ale, I want to turn the mic over to you and have you introduce yourself and your background and your role at Fidelity.
Yeah. First of all, I'm the one between you and Joe Coughlin, so please stay. This is going to be much more boring than what's happening later. My background, I basically my first job was to work with a startup and help them build a mobile internet business. 5 crazy guys that were coming from Seattle, Washington, back to Italy, which I loved. After that, I did corporate strategy for a few years, and within corporate strategy, I realized that what I really wanted to explore was how startups and corporates can work together. And Fidelity gave me the opportunity to do this, first in London, then in Switzerland, then in the Silicon Valley, and then running the team worldwide.
What inspired you to take that career path, or what intrigued you about the relationship between startups and corporates?
Let me say there was a realization at some point. I used to work in the telecommunication industry. Corporate strategy in, 2003, 2004 was a tariff plan. believe it or not. So the top of corporate strategy was basically doing statistical analysis on what happens if we give 200 minutes for this amount of money. Are we going to make money or not? That's as far as you could go with strategy. Then suddenly 3G happens, mobile internet, and so on and so forth, and suddenly technology takes a much more important role in the future of your company. And you realize that the technology-based innovation is actually much stronger in the startup world than in the corporate. But the corporate still have the distribution, still have the scale, honestly still have the money. At Vodafone, we were running a 56% EBITDA with 16 million mobile subscribers. So if you can find the right technology, the right startup to bring in, that's a much faster path to scale for the startup, and it's a much faster path to market for the corporate than if we were to do R&D ourselves.
And when you're looking at these companies, either from the Fidelity lens or you're looking for a new company to advise, are there sort of checkboxes that you look for? Or for some of the entrepreneurs in the audience, what advice would you give them about working with large enterprises, or how to make sure that they're, quote, enterprise ready before they enter these conversations?
Yes, I'd say there are, I wouldn't call them checkboxes, but I'd say this. The first thing is you need to realize which area of the corporate you're really going to affect. If you're working in a mission critical, if your technology is going to affect the mission critical part of the corporate, then you need to be super robust. And what I mean by that is, I'll give a silly example, but within Fidelity, we move 12-15% to the New York Stock Exchange every day. So a mistake on the 10th decimal is going to cost us a few millions. So that's simply not acceptable. On the other side, if your startup is working on something on the edge, something where you can actually take a risk without reputational risk, then it's much easier. So number one, you need to realize exactly where do you operate in the tech stack of a corporate, and therefore what kind of maturity you need to have. The second thing I would say is listen carefully to what the corporate has to say. And I'll give you a silly example. The week after we launched voice-based authentication. So today, basically, when you call the customer care of Fidelity, you're being authenticated automatically by the tone of your voice. So no password, no pins, no nothing. The week after we launched, an amazing startup in the voice security business basically calls me and say, "Oh, you guys don't get it. Can we please talk to the CTO, to the CIO, and so on?" And I'm like, I understand, but you're basically telling someone who just came out of the garage with a new fancy BMW, they should have bought a Porsche. You gotta wait for 3 years for the lease to expire and then knock back. So knock back on the door. So so listen to that, because sometimes we give you advice that you might not like, but it's the truth. And and the third thing is be patient. Selling to a corporate is very, very hard. And I think the startups that I've seen doing this best is the startups that understand that, and then the startups that can explain the venture capital, the investors, how hard it is. Can you really support a 9-12 month sales cycle? Do you have the cash to do that? Because otherwise, you are going to risk that you are investing time and money, that by the way is not yours, to work on a potential business, and you're gonna get frustrated if that business doesn't go through. So some of the startups that I've seen actually start much smaller so that they can create that cash flow and start going into the enterprise sales that requires that kind of different cash flow profile much later. And I think they are, at that point, they basically can put the right weight behind a corporate sale.
So if you really love your BMW and it's been a really reliable car, 2 years down the line, the Porsche calls you up and says, they've got these new features. We really want to sell you on the Porsche. how can they change your mind on the BMW?
I'd say something different. I don't think that you're going to change our mind between the BMW or the Porsche until you reach a certain stage with the BMW where you actually need to change the car. But boy, you show up with a flying car and you tell me that I can skip traffic on a 101. Let's talk about it.
So something you mentioned previously was focusing on what part of the organization that you're going to add value to. I think everyone here is very familiar with Fidelity Investments and the fact that your service portfolio is quite broad. So where are you focusing those energies, or I guess more importantly, where can startups start thinking about where to play in the financial services space and how that's impactful to Fidelity?
Are you thinking more of trends of what's happening in financial services? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. I probably think of 3 things that are happening. 3 big trends that where we are trying to look for the right startups. The first thing is there's a brilliant post from Greylock that talks about systems of intelligence, but the first trend that I see is essentially applied AI. So AI is getting out of the technology stack and now solving real use cases that might be small, but that are going to make a difference in consumers' life. And I'm thinking I'm thinking of this as a way of taking away the cognitive load of consumers, of individuals, of financial advisors, for all of those functions that are mathematical, so that are math or statistics based. From the easiest thing, today you can automate your savings. You can apply machine learning to predict your income and your expenses, and therefore every night you can basically put aside a certain amount of money that changes every day, and that the machine is learning is amount that you will not need in the future. You can do the same thing for tax loss harvesting. Again, it's a mathematical function, portfolio rebalancing, a statistical function, and so on and so forth. So there are a number of these things that Alec was saying before. Financial services in the past were very much targeting the top of the market. Well, technology actually allows you to bring some of those functions that the wealthy people would hire, a financial advisor, investment advisor, tax advisor, and so on. Technology allows you to bring that down market. So the first one is AI or system of intelligence applied to financial services function. The second one is there's a nice blog from Open Invest, from Joshua Levin, the founder of Open Invest, that actually Andreessen also published, that talks about how we went from mutual funds to ETFs and what's happening after that. And so that is another area that I'm really intrigued by. And what I mean by that is that the ETF were basically sold on the premises that is very hard to predict a priori who is going to be the active fund manager that is going to beat the market in the next 20 years. So it's very hard to make a bet on an active fund that statistically you're guaranteed that will beat the market. It's better to have a machine to invest on the wider market. That was the premise of the ETF. However, as individuals, as humans, we all have convictions. We have convictions that might actually skew the market one side or the other. Those convictions might be impact investing related, so what social impact we want to make with our investment, or they might be about other things. Some of you might believe that gasoline is something that we will not use 10 years from now. So would you want to put more into platinum, because platinum is an element of fuel cells, and fuel cells are at the very basis of of an electricity-based economy. So I'm saying that as in I don't know exactly what is that future, but I think that people will want to have a saying in there that goes beyond what the ETFs can deliver. And given the first trend, so the mathematical function being taken away from a machine, the bandwidth, the mental bandwidth that you can dedicate to that as a human will actually augment. And the third thing is that our entire industry was built on the premises of a three-stages life, of a life of education, accumulation, and decumulation, or enjoyment. I think that that's not true anymore, and that the mix of life, work, and therefore how your finances need to support that will be very different. How many people nowadays in their late 40s would probably leave a career, but they have a wife, they have kids in school and so on, and they would want to build a company. What would you call that? Pre-retirement? What is that? And financially, how you're going to support that? So I think that in that, the role of a financial advisor, the role of financial planning, all of that financial profile of your life will radically change. And if you think historically, Joe was talking before about the generation. I don't remember what book you were reading about the generations, the wave, age wave. So when I think about those macro trends, I think about people that have fought the World War II, basically and came back, were the first people to actually accumulate some wealth. They did not inherit anything. The people that are coming after them are the people that we start inheriting something. And our generation is the first generation that will have to deal with that. So as a consequence, that financial plan, again, changes completely from how my parents or how my grandparents had to think about that. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that was a long answer.
That was a wonderful answer. From the transition of expectations, not just on the technical side and the services side in financial services, but from the user experience side and what new generations are expecting from the technology tools that they use, how has that changed how Fidelity looks at new product delivery and the startups that they bring into their portfolio?
So I think that there is, let me say, I'll go back to the systems of intelligence. And the way I'm thinking about that is that if you think what happened between 2000 and 2010, a number of your financial transactions were suddenly available over the web. And that's what I call sort of the system of record. So suddenly you could see your credit card, your checking account, your investment account, blah, blah, blah. The system of engagement is what came in the next decade. So these were the likes of the personal capital, the Fidelity full view, and so on. But basically, how do you aggregate the data and visualize that data? And the system of intelligence that are coming now are the system that will actually take action, not just give you insights, but take action. In doing that, I think that what is left is the systems of value or the system of emotions. So when all of these functions, the data aggregation, the action on top of the data are taken over by a machine, I think that humans can finally do what they do best, which is basically managing relationships. And so the way I see that the interaction between financial services companies like Fidelity and customers changing is that it's a combination of the two. But a combination of the two where the human and the digital do something different. Where, for instance, you will not pick up the phone and call a customer care, or you will not walk to an investor center to ask for the balance of your account. But you would want to speak to a human to talk about how important it is, for instance, for the first time, if you are a first-time immigrant, how important it is to plan to give your children opportunities that you did not have, and therefore, what should I do with my 529? should I do with my college planning? And those are questions in which I do not, once those hit your values, your personal values, I think you will want those things to, those conversations to happen with a human. A human that is eventually helped by technology to, for instance, surface latent behaviors that will affect your investment strategy, that will affect your risk prevention.
There is a sort of interesting kind of ethics and technology conversation around, do we think humans can ever truly be replaced by technology in these highly regulated and key industries like healthcare and financial services? And you talk about how there are certain conversations that in human nature we would always want to have with another human. Do you ever see a future where humans are not the end for these conversations in financial services, where I might be talking to a robot or a
And you might not even
a
realize.
digital AI? I might not know. It's probably already happening.
No, I think that the conversation between humans will have a higher value. I'll give you an example of a startup that I saw last week. If you are a wealthy individual and your daughter is getting married and you want to pull out $100,000 out of your account, wealthy individual, and you go to your financial advisor and ask the question, what the startup does is that they would basically calculate automatically what are the trades that you should execute to most tax efficiently take that liquidity out of your account. So to answer your question, you still want to have an advisor to whom you're talking about how important it is that your daughter is getting married and how important it is for you to actually give her the wedding that she's dreaming of. At the same time, you don't want an advisor that is going to spend the next 3 days doing Excel calculations about what's the best way of extracting that. So what's the best way of selling my positions to get this kind of liquidity? Should be a button, should be an AI, should be a chatbot, without a doubt. But again, when you're going to touch when you're going to touch things that matter to you, I think that that's what humans are going to talk about.
I have 2 last questions for you, and then I want to make sure we have some time for audience questions. The first is, from your perspective, what is the largest sort of discrepancy between what incumbent financial institutions say is the most important innovation goal for them and what they're actually investing in?
Let me say that there isn't really a discrepancy. There is more of a portfolio view, and what I mean by that is that I'll give this example, but I can't make names. There's a digital bank, which, by the way, I'm using, that went down for 4 days 2 weeks ago. So for 4 days, you could not make any transaction. You could not go to the ATM. None of your payments were going out. It's okay. I'm still their customer. I still use them for my day-to-day spending. This is something that Fidelity could never do. So when you think about a corporate, I think that the discrepancy is there must be a portfolio balance between keeping the lights on, which is what creates the cash to actually invest in innovation. So there isn't a discrepancy between what we say we will invest in and what we actually invest in. But clearly you need to, in that portfolio, there is a very big part of the investment that needs to go into keeping the lights on.
Makes makes sense. My last question, everyone who registered and checked in at the front desk was also asked this question, so I want to make sure we ask it of you as well. But essentially, is there one technology or innovative idea in financial services that isn't getting a lot of attention now, but that you think could be industry changing over the next 10 years?
Ooh, I don't know. I think tokenization is something that might fundamentally change the industry. And when I say tokenization, I do not mean the blockchain. By the way, this is me speaking, so that this has nothing to do with my employer, please. And I think that but again, tokenization not in the blockchain meaning, but in simply taking a very large asset and dividing it into chunks that can be invested in by the mass market. I was talking to one of your founders before. There's a company in London that is basically buying commercial or residential buildings, then building a special purpose vehicle for every building that they buy, issuing 1,000 shares for those special purpose vehicle, and you can invest in single shares. So you can build your own portfolio of residential or commercial properties. You basically cash in the rent every month, and every 5 years you're selling the building and so on. There's no blockchain involved, but that's what I mean by tokenization. So, and you can do the same for car collections, wine collections, diamonds, paintings. If you think about that, you suddenly go from the mass market thinking about public equity and fixed and bonds and cash, essentially, into can I invest $100 in this startup that is pretty cool, or can I invest $100 in this 1985 wine? I'm no expert. Maybe it was a good vintage. I have no idea. But that is something that again would do exactly what Alec was describing. So bringing those high level wealthy individual financial products down market for the benefits of all.
Awesome. Thanks, Ale.
Thank you.
I've had a great time asking you questions, but I want to turn it over to the audience and see if anyone has some lingering thoughts. I think we have a couple mic runners as well, so wait for the mic before you ask your questions.
Hey, this is Pramath. So for me, like one of the best talks I've had like recently attended on like finance was like this one by Cliff Asness, and he's from AQR. And he talks about a couple of things, and like one thing he talked about was like how multi-factor investing is completely unintuitive. It's very hard to have conviction in a multi-factor investment model. And the other thing he talked about was like how the last 10 years have been the most weird years in investing because low volatility has been there, and value investing has not been working, at least for the last 2 years. It's been kind of like flailing behind. So for me, a value which an investment advisor brings in is the conviction, right? Like the retail customer doesn't really know what's going inside in investment instruments, and the investment advisor is the one who's bringing in that conviction. Now the challenge is if AI becomes a bigger function, these instruments might not even be understandable by the investment advisor. So what happens to conviction? Are we just Hail Mary and just like things are going to work? Like what happens to the belief in investment? We can't backtest things anymore. We don't know what's really happening inside these algorithms. So.
Whoa, that's a very interesting question. First of all, I agree with you that in an ever-rising market, everybody is a genius. Every investor is a genius, no doubt. But to answer, so I think there are two things in what you said. The first one is the belief that investing or having conviction about investment is hard, which might be true, but some individuals might think differently. And what I mean by that is, if you buy the iPhone, if you are a guy that queues every time the new iPhone comes out, you got, I don't know how many MacBook at home, you subscribe to Apple TV on the beta, or to Apple TV Plus on the beta, and so on. I'm pretty convinced that you have conviction about Apple. Why should I stop you from skewing your portfolio towards Apple? Now, whether that's right or wrong, this is for the investment advisor to help you with that. So that's the first part of the answer. You're right. Having said that, I think we need to start having an adult-to-adult conversation, as opposed to a parent-child conversation. So that's step number one. Step number two, I think that a lot of understanding what's behind those mathematical models that AI is bringing, absolutely, that is what the investment advisor should do. I'll make a very tangible example. We are meeting a number of startups that are building those kind of black boxes that can beat the market. But the first question that they get from our quant is, how can I look inside the black box? And how can I understand exactly how did the black box come to this conclusion? And if I can't, thank you very much. I wish you all the best, and I hope you will continue beating the market. But this is just not something that we feel comfortable. We feel comfortable that we could bring to market. Sorry, I'm just trying to measure my words with. I care about my badge.
We have time for one more, and I think we've got one hand up right here. So Kate's bringing your mic.
So all of the investment in technology for financial services companies is in lieu of labor. And our traditional understanding of the pricing of products was that labor was the most substantial component of that. But what we see is these dramatic investments in technology, which should lower the cost. The cost isn't being passed on to the consumer. And some people are saying this is a big part of income inequality, that the component that traditionally was reserved for labor is now being reserved to management and not passed back to the consumer. Is there any discussion going on in financial services about returning that productivity to the customer set as opposed to reserving that productivity to management?
I'm honestly, I need to be very careful with what I say here, because again, I care about my badge. I can tell you this, and again, this is my own personal experience, Alessandro, not talking on behalf of my company, but what I can tell you is that we do feel that responsibility for the money that we manage, being the retirement money of middle-class Americans. So we don't take that lightly. Then probably our PR, our compliance department will have a proper answer to your question, but I don't, sorry.
Thank you guys for your questions, and thank you, Ale, for joining us today.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Ale. So I'm going to invite Joe Coughlin back up to the stage. He spoke with us earlier.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Unlike Alessandro, where he has to be a little reticent on some of his comments, every comment that I will make is exactly the way I feel and my firm feels, and I guess I could get fired by a client, but we're passionate about it.
So can you tell us, so I think a lot of you probably had it was very exciting actually to see you speak earlier, but for those of them that didn't have the opportunity, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and why you're not going to get fired?
Yeah. Okay, so in real life, I have a
risk advisory firm, independent risk advisory firm in New York. And we service what we define as the alternative capital space. That is mostly private equity funds, hedge funds, distressed debt funds, and some VC funds that care about their investments, even though they may have a very de minimis ownership stake. In turn, then, we also act as outsourced risk advisors to several hundred of their portfolio companies that they have in some capacity, working with CFOs or treasurers or risk managers or what they may have. But we're driving transparency into the marketplace where we're not an insurance broker. We don't want to be one. We respect what they do, but we're going to drive this transparency that the clients normally don't see. So we're basically taking the carriers, which is the capacity, and bringing it closer to the clientele. If anybody has seen the show Ray Donovan, I use this a lot because it's the fastest way to understand what we do. But we are fixers, and I say we're like Ray Donovan without the sex and the violence. Except that sometimes I really would like to inject a little violence into the equation, because there's so many passive-aggressive individuals that you end up working with that they will literally work against their own company to stop an idea that will possibly help them. So that's what we do.
Awesome, thank you. So coming from New York, actually we're really privileged tonight. Joe actually flew in this morning to be here, just for us, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
So you're coming from New York. I'd love to hear your kind of take on, we just had LA on the stage, some of these really large incumbent institutions. How are they reacting to all of this change?
Yeah, well, so there's so many ways to answer the change, because everybody's just talking about disruption all the time. And if anyone was to say what industry should be disrupted more than almost just about anything else, you would say the insurance industry. If you took, this is just a fact, State Farm. State Farm has a database that has 10 times the amount of information stored on it than the Library of Congress. That's just State Farm. There's 2,600 other property and casualty firms that are out there that are all collecting the same amount of data. If you take that and you expand that out there and you say, well, what's involved in insurance and risk sharing, you'd say, well, my gosh, there's got to be a better way to do it, right? You should be able to just open up your app. You should be able to download the information. You should be able to do this. Except the problem is that when you're buying insurance, you're buying an intangible product. And so what are you doing? You're buying, essentially, you're renting the balance sheet of a third party, which is your insurance company, for a fixed period of time, a year, 3 years, 6 years, in perpetuity, if it's some kind of environmental issue. But you're renting that balance sheet. You give them a premium. They're supposed to give you a coverage when you have a claim. Well, what are you really buying? You're buying a contract. You're buying a legal contract. And what's in a contract? Words. Words have meanings, and then there's different interpretation of those meanings. We want the interpretation to be ours. So when you're sitting in a very hostile claims environment, where you've had a claim and now you're being denied that claim, you'd say, this isn't very easy to disrupt, because you have claims issues, you have regulatory issues, compliance issues, you have data entry. I mean, so you'd say to yourself, this really should be a very easy place to do it, but it's incredibly difficult. It's not just that easy to just say, oh, I can just in a flick and I can get this. It's very complex.
This kind of change and disruption affecting other parts of the financial institution, thinking like risk management, capital investment.
Yeah, well, what you can say with an absolute fact is that the insurance industry still is, but used to be more so, a relationship business. And an underwriter is sitting there looking at everybody in this room, whether they have their automobile, their homeowner's insurance, or their business, and what have you, and they have underwriting guidelines as to, are you the client that we want, and do you match these underwriting guidelines? Like if you have a home in a certain place, how close are you to a fire department, what have you? If you're a business, what do you manufacture? Where do you distribute it to? What is the chances of having the claims that are going to make it back to their door? Historically, it's been a relationship business that if somebody has a great relationship, if a broker has a great relationship with an underwriter, that underwriter will waive the requirements. and hope that the claim doesn't make its way back and he gets caught with it. So in the past, it's been that way. Today, it's all data, right? It's data and analytics, and everybody knows it exists, and everybody wants to see it. And that information that's out there, there's a friend of mine, he's no longer at AIG, but Peter Hancock, if anybody was following that, used to be a very, very successful hedge fund manager and trader. And he became the CEO of AIG. And he said, my gosh, I should be able to look at this data and it should tell me that I can't make money writing workers' compensation on all of these businesses around the United States alone. So I want to get out of these places. I'm not going to do it here. I'm not going to do it here, here, or here. Or if I am, I'm going to charge this amount of money. Well, when he says, well, I'm not going to do it here, well, then he loses the business on 5 other lines as a result of that. So there's a systemic movement. So it's very difficult. The data points to, and Peter was looking at it, that the data tells me I can't make money. So then the only other way you can do it is just collect as much as you can in premiums and then put it into some kind of very good, hedge fund, and which you really can't because you have statutory requirements and things of that. And it's very cumbersome, and that's where you get into compliance and state regulations.
Okay, so we're talking about data, we're talking about
Yeah.
patterns. Are there any patterns that you see across organizations? You work with both big and small.
Yeah, well, the patterns that people are going after right now is the low-hanging fruit. There's a downward pressure with the amalgamation of this data to say, so what's involved in the delivery of risk or insurance to a client? And you'd say, well, you got insurance agents. The agents themselves, they get a commission. The commission's worth anywhere between 10 and 20%, depending on what kind of product line. Oh, well, we don't need to pay that. And then you'd say, well, there's different types of delivery systems. Some are direct writers like Allstate and State Farm and Geico and Progressive, and others are your Chubb and your CNAs and your Travelers and your Hartfords and things like that. So you have this massive consolidation where people are saying there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. But who owns the client and who controls the client? I think what we're seeing right now is that people, like with the advent of companies like Lemonade, just in particular, they are demonstrating the fact that I don't care if it's just a kid or if it's a middle-aged adult wants to buy a simple homeowner's policy or an auto policy, you can do it, and you can find that you can compress those margins that once were part of the delivery system there.
Okay, thank you. So I know we're running a little
Yeah.
bit late, but one of the most interesting things to me whenever I talk to you is that you always seem to know what's going on. And when you're talking about financial services, that's hard. There's obviously a ton of moving parts. What do you do to stay up on everything?
Well, I wish I was, right? I
Convinced us.
think I'm way behind, but I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to see that really what's going on. Well, for me, and I'm not just saying this because I'm here, this coming to GSV and is like, I don't know about anybody else in this room, but if I go into a hardware store, I will walk down aisle after aisle, and I went in for one thing, and I will come out with more crap. Now, I'm not saying that coming into GSV is crap. I'm saying that I don't need an Allen wrench now, right? I don't know if I'm going to need an Allen wrench before I turn 140, if anyone was listening before. But I want one, right? And I love seeing it, and as I go down another. So when I come out and I see all of these things that are out there, that's the way I try to. I try to keep up. I keep reading so many different things that whether we're at 25 billion or 50 billion, Internet of Things, that it's, connected devices by 2020 or 2022, 2025. It's coming. We do know that. And we also do know that 160 million businesses are unbanked right now, and we know that there's some 2 billion people that are unbanked. So if you're a financial institution and you're looking at this, what do you think you're thinking, right? Where's the opportunity? And once you get that, and kind of like Ali, once you've got these folks, you can have them for life. And there's big dollars at play here.
Okay,
So this is like a hypodermic needle for me. Just mainline injection right into my veins.
good. I'm going to put that on our website.
Okay, thank you.
So you bring up a really good point. Can you think of any examples of really large incumbent organizations that are handling this well, other than LA?
Yeah, the two that come to mind, and no, I won't say really, really well. I'll give like an Ali comment there, like I'll do a disclosure so I'm not offending anybody. I just don't think it's seen, the proof of day the consumer has seen it yet. But Two Sigma is a client of ours. Somebody said AQR before, that's a client of ours. But Two Sigma is it's black box trading, a very, very, very sophisticated model. And they then teamed up with Hamilton Re and AIG. These companies, these insurtech companies that are out there, I think it was between 2012 and 2017, have grown on a CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, of 181% a year over 5 years. So, there's billions of dollars that are going in here, and some people are just buying up these things just to hold them. It's like a put for the future. They don't even know if they're ever going to use it. They just want to say, okay, well, it seems good, so let's spend about $5-7 million of this or whatever. So I think that those are.
Yeah. So with
I
that,
just even lost myself in the answer to that question.
so kind of with that, do you see these large corporations getting into some of this new technology predominantly through partnerships or through other means?
Yeah. And the other one, thank you. It was AXA XL is doing some really neat stuff. And look, right now it's going with the drone technology, and they're marrying some of these things. So, for instance, you could have an insurance company that's down in Florida, or it could be anywhere, but it's writing policies in Florida. And if you have a swimming pool and somebody doesn't fill out the application correctly, and you say that there is a cover to it, just for mosquitoes and things like that. Well, you can now look and you can basically segment your business to, if there's any covering on that pool, your loss rate is going to be far, far lower if those coverings are not there. So when you have the hurricanes that come in, each one of those pool coverings costs $55,000 to put back up. And if you don't have that, well, now you could sit with the drone technology. But as we said before, whether you're taking the technology that's going up there right now with OneWeb or SpaceX and Starlink system, or this, the constellation I was talking about before, you're going to see everything everywhere. So you're going to go after the vertical change. That's going to affect the risk side, the transportation side, the energy. Every one of our clients is in every industry group. So they're into healthcare, they're into infrastructure, they're into the energy, the entire stream, upstream, midstream, downstream products. So everything is going to be affected by this. And if it's not us, it's China. But the barrier to entry is massive to get into that space.
Okay, so
Literally space.
I'm going to ask one last question because I don't want to go over time, and I do want to give you an opportunity to kind of network after the event. You make a lot of angel investments yourself. Any in financial services?
One right now, and I don't want to, for anybody that's out there that's working on something that's going to, hopefully be a part of this disruption. The complexity of it and finding it in a way that works and that could get adopted more than just selling your platform to a large organization right now. I don't want to say I'm cynical on it. It's just that I have one, but I have through fund investments, I have a lot more, but I didn't do those. Those were done by a general partner.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed not only this, but your talk earlier, and we've bribed Joe, so he's going to be here all of happy hour. He's promised. And I've got, before I let you go off stage, we had a few questions that we were really hoping, some of the attendees from this evening's events could answer for us. And so to get everyone to do that, we offered a raffle, and there's two prizes in the raffle. The first one is a year-long subscription to Passport, which I think Alec, told us a little bit about earlier. It's a platform that supports startups, and if you're not a startup, there's still a ton of really valuable stuff on the platform. So if you could please draw our first winner.
I am a member of Passport, by the way.
You can connect with Joe.
Yes. Okay. Maybe that,
Yeah.
That way?
All right. Arpit from Bank of America. I know you're here. I saw you earlier. Congratulations.
What's he get?
He works
that's
for the
Passport.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's won Passport. The next winner gets a really nice bottle of wine.
Ah, terrific.
Not quite as good as Passport, but
All right.
still enjoyable.
I apologize to all the non-winners that will kill me. I use my DJ voice there. Okay.
Thank you. All right, Roxanne from Tigient. Roxanne. Oh, Roxanne. Awesome. Congratulations. Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Joe, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please grab a drink and network.
What's with these lima beans?